What if the Bible we hold so sacred is only part of the story, a window into truth, but not the full view of heaven's plan? What if a hidden book, older than many of the texts we cherish, claimed to hold the missing pieces not just of history, but of creation itself? A book that speaks of angels formed before light, a calendar designed not by man, but by God, and a law not born at Sinai, but etched in heaven long before the world began. This book exists. It's called the Book of Jubilees. Once read by early believers and preserved in Ethiopia for over 2,000 years, yet banned, buried, and erased from most of the Christian world. Why? Why would a sacred text be silenced? What truths did it reveal that religious authorities found too dangerous to accept? Could it be that this forbidden book unmasks a deeper rhythm of time, a cosmic law forgotten by the modern world, and a spiritual battle that has shaped humanity from Eden to the end times? In the next moments, we will uncover the secrets of the Book of Jubilees, not as scholars, but as seekers. Not with fear, but with awe, because once we open its pages, we step into a world where heaven's plan was written long before Genesis ever began. And it all starts with time, not as we measure it, but as God created it, sacred time. A divine calendar erased. According to the Book of Jubilees, time was not merely a measurement of passing days. It was a divine structure created by God Himself with precision and purpose. Unlike the lunar calendar adopted by many ancient cultures, including Israel during temple times, Jubilees insists that the true calendar is solar, a perfect system of 364 days divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days, each aligned with 52 exact weeks. This was no human invention. It was according to the text dictated by an angel to Moses on Mount Sinai, written on the heavenly tablets and embedded into the fabric of creation. The calendar did more than mark the passage of time. It was a way of aligning with the sacred rhythm of heaven. In this divine system, the Sabbath always fell on the same day. Festivals never drifted across the week. Order reigned, harmony prevailed, and time itself was a mirror of God's eternal nature. But this is where the tension begins, because the temple in Jerusalem followed a lunar calendar, one that shifted with the moon cycles, one that required constant adjustments, intercalated months, and human calculation. A calendar that, according to Jubilees, led to confusion, misaligned festivals, and ultimately spiritual disorder. For the authors of Jubilees, the abandonment of the solar calendar was no small error. It was an act of disobedience, a rebellion against divine timing. And this defiance had consequences. The text warns that sacred observances performed on the wrong days were not merely incorrect, they were abominable. Days meant to be holy were profaned. Cycles of rest and renewal were broken. The result was not just error, but separation from God's appointed order. So why was this calendar erased? Why would religious authorities reject a timekeeping system that claimed divine authorship? The answer perhaps lies in power. The temple depended on the lunar calendar to set its rituals. To challenge that system was to challenge the very foundation of religious control. And so the solar calendar of Jubilees was suppressed, its teachings dismissed, its scrolls hidden or destroyed. But not all communities forgot. The sect at Qumran, the keepers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, preserved this calendar. And even today, echoes of it live on in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where Jubilees is still read as scripture and time is still kept according to its sacred structure. But this divine calendar is only the beginning, because within the Book of Jubilees, the unfolding of time is tied to something even deeper, something that predates creation itself, the origin of the angelic order, and a world governed not just by seasons and days, but by beings of light who watched over all. Creation and the angelic order before time. Before light ever touched the face of the deep, before the stars found their place in the sky, there were angels. According to the Book of Jubilees, these celestial beings were not created after the world, or even during it, but on the very first day of creation before the formation of the physical world as we know it. This revelation shifts the entire perspective of Genesis. Because in Jubilees, creation is not just about the earth, the animals, or even humanity. It begins in the spiritual realm, with the formation of a divine hierarchy. These angels were not abstract figures or mere messengers. They had distinct roles. Some governed the movements of the heavens, guiding the sun, moon, and stars in their orbits. Others served as guardians of divine law, protectors of sacred truth. And among them, one figure stands out: the angel of the presence, a being who stands before God's throne and delivers his words directly to chosen prophets, including Moses. This angel does not simply convey messages. He teaches, he reveals, he instructs Moses in the divine calendar, the laws of purity, the meaning of sacred festivals, all written on the heavenly tablets. In Genesis, the creation narrative is largely physical. The formation of the earth, the waters, the plants, and eventually humanity. But in Jubilees, the foundation is spiritual. The upper heavens are created first, then the angels, then the structure of time itself. Only then does the material world begin to take shape. It is a reversal of perspective. The visible is built upon the invisible, and the laws that govern human life were first established in the realm of heaven. This order also carries with it a profound spiritual message, that everything visible is patterned after what is unseen. The festivals, the Sabbaths, even the concept of rest are not man-made customs. They are reflections of practices already observed in the heavens. The Sabbath was not given first to Israel. It was honored by angels before man was formed. Holiness did not begin with the tabernacle. It was already present among the hosts of heaven. According to Jubilees, we were invited into a rhythm that pre-existed us, a harmony that echoes the structure of creation itself. This angelic vision also introduces attention, because if the universe is built on divine order, what happens when that order is broken? The next chapter in the Book of Jubilees reveals how, even before Adam sinned, a fracture was already forming. Not in heaven above, but through humanity's failure to recognize the eternal gift of rest, a gift as ancient as creation, a gift known as the Sabbath. The Sabbath, a law older than creation. In most tellings of the Bible, the Sabbath appears as a commandment delivered to Moses, a sacred day of rest instituted at Mount Sinai. But in the Book of Jubilees, the Sabbath is not merely a law for Israel, it is a law of the cosmos, a divine rhythm woven into the foundation of creation, kept not only by man, but by angels. Long before there were nations, temples, or tablets of stone, the seventh day was set apart, sanctified, blessed, not just for humanity, but for all of God's creation. According to Jubilees, the Sabbath was established on the very first week of the world's existence. It was observed by the angels themselves, who kept it as a sign of obedience and reverence to God. It was written on the heavenly tablets, sealed to eternity, and marked as a sign between God and His creation forever. This was not a temporary commandment. It was not a cultural observance. It was eternal, cosmic. a holy rest observed both in heaven and on earth. And here lies the deeper mystery. Because in the traditional narrative, Adam is created and begins life in the garden without any clear instruction about the Sabbath. But in Jubilees, Adam is given the Sabbath as part of the original covenant. He is taught by angels how to honor it. He is shown that this day is not just about physical rest, but about spiritual alignment. It is the day when heaven and earth move together in harmony, when creation pauses not from exhaustion, but from reverence. But the story does not end there. The Sabbath becomes more than a weekly observance. It becomes the heartbeat of time itself. Every 7th year, the land must rest. Every 49 years, a great jubilee is proclaimed. Debts are forgiven. Slaves are freed. The earth is renewed. All of it tied to that original 7th day. This system of rest woven through weeks and years was meant to remind humanity that time does not belong to us. It belongs to God. Yet over time, this sacred rhythm was broken. Humanity strayed from the pattern. The calendar shifted. The festivals drifted. The land was worked without pause. And the Sabbath, once a divine covenant shared by angels and men, became neglected, distorted, or forgotten. According to Jubilees, this break from sacred time was one of the first cracks in the moral and spiritual order of the world. Because when the divine structure of time is ignored, something deeper unravels. Creation becomes misaligned, and sin like a shadow begins to take root. That shadow first appears in a field with 2 brothers, a sacrifice, and the very first shedding of innocent blood. What follows is a tragedy not just of family, but of cosmic consequence. The first sin, reimagined Cain blood and a broken world. The story of Cain and Abel is often told as a tale of jealousy and violence. But in the Book of Jubilees, it becomes something far deeper, a moment when the very fabric of creation is torn. When sin leaves a stain not only on a man's soul, but upon the earth itself. According to Jubilees, this is not just the first murder. It is the first fracture in the divine order, a violation that echoes beyond Eden, disrupting the sacred balance that God had designed. Cain's offering, according to Jubilees, was not rejected out of divine favoritism. It was rejected because it was careless. He offered from the produce of the ground, but without reverence, without his best. Abel, in contrast, gave the firstborn of his flock a sacrifice chosen with care and honor. And so, God accepted Abel's gift. Fire, perhaps from heaven itself, consumed it. Cain saw this. His face fell, and something dark began to grow within him. God warned him. Sin was crouching at the door, but Cain did not listen. He lured Abel into the field and struck him down. In Genesis, this act ends with a curse and banishment. But in Jubilees, the consequences stretch even further. Abel's blood defiled the very ground it soaked into. The land itself was wounded. Its ability to bear fruit was diminished. And from that moment, nature would never be the same. This detail is vital. Because in Jubilees, sin is not simply a moral failure, it is a disruption of the divine ecosystem, a disturbance in the relationship between humanity, the earth, and the heavens. What was once in harmony now groans with imbalance. The ground mourns, creation recoils, and time itself becomes tainted by the blood of injustice. Even more haunting is the idea that this sin was recorded, not just remembered, but written down on the heavenly tablets. In the divine court of heaven, every act of righteousness and every act of rebellion is documented. Cain's transgression is not just a memory. It is a spiritual debt, a weight that demands reckoning. And yet, even within this bleak moment, Jubilees offers a thread of hope, because the same tablet that records sin also records repentance. Forgiveness is possible, but only if the heart turns back to the Creator. This understanding of sin as cosmic disorder reframes the early chapters of human history. The earth is not a neutral backdrop. It is sacred ground. And when blood is spilled, it responds. The first murder, then, is not only a tragedy between brothers, it is a breach in the covenant of life itself. But Cain's act is not the last time divine boundaries are crossed. What follows in Jubilees is far more terrifying. A rebellion not just from man, but from heaven. Angels stepping outside their roles. Forbidden knowledge given to humanity. And giants born of unions that were never meant to be. A darkness that rises before the flood. A corruption that must be cleansed, but not before it gives birth to something the world still fears. Demons, the Nephilim, the Watchers, and the birth of demons. Long before the floodwaters rose before the ark was built, or the animals gathered, a different kind of corruption had already begun to spread. According to the Book of Jubilees, it did not begin with man alone, but with beings from above, the Watchers. A group of angels sent to guide humanity, protect creation, and uphold the order of heaven. But they did not remain faithful to their purpose. They looked upon human women and desired them. And in that desire, they broke the boundary between heaven and earth. The Book of Jubilees expands on this story with unsettling clarity. These fallen angels did not simply take wives. They introduced forbidden knowledge. They taught humanity secrets not meant for mortal hands, sorcery, astrology, enchantments, the crafting of weapons, and the use of adornments to seduce. Knowledge that, while powerful, led only to pride, violence, and sin. And from their union with human women came offspring not fully divine and not fully human, the Nephilim, giants of immense size and terrifying hunger. These beings were unnatural from the beginning. Jubilees tells us they consumed everything, fields of grain, herds of animals, and when that was not enough, they turned on each other. They devoured flesh. They spilled blood. And the earth, already wounded by Cain's crime, became soaked in chaos. It was a corruption that could not be ignored. Behind it all stood a darker figure, Mastema, a name rarely heard in most Bibles, but in Jubilees, he is the prince of evil spirits, the tempter, the accuser, the one who whispered to the Watchers, who delighted in humanity's fall. And when God decreed judgment on the earth, Mastema had one more request. As the Nephilim were destroyed, their spirits remained, restless, unclean, and bound to the earth. Mastema asked to retain control over 1/10 of them, to use as tools of temptation, spirits that would test humanity, confuse the heart, and accuse the soul. And shockingly, God agreed. This is one of the most sobering revelations in the entire Book of Jubilees. That evil in part was allowed to remain. That demons, as we understand them, are the wandering spirits of the Nephilim, beings born of rebellion and sealed in unrest. They are not fallen angels, but the offspring of an unholy union. Their existence is a wound in creation that has never fully healed. This origin story challenges many traditional views. It explains why evil feels both external and internal, why temptation seems spiritual yet so intimately personal. Because according to Jubilees, humanity is still contending with ancient forces, with spirits birthed in an age before the flood, before the law, before the tabernacle. And that flood, often seen as God's judgment on humanity, is revealed in Jubilees to be much more. It is not only about cleansing sin, it is about ending a war, a spiritual invasion that corrupted the earth from within. But there was one man who stood apart, one man who walked in righteousness, and through him God would begin again. His name was Noah, and in Jubilees, his story carries new meaning, a story not just of survival, but of a renewed covenant, new laws, and a new division of the world itself, the divine laws and Noah according to Jubilees. In most tellings, Noah is a man who builds an ark, survives the flood, and then fades quietly into the background. But in the Book of Jubilees, Noah's role is far more profound. He is not just a survivor. He is a bearer of divine knowledge, a recipient of laws that, according to this ancient text, were revealed long before Moses ever ascended Mount Sinai. In Jubilees, Noah becomes a priest of righteousness, chosen to carry forward the eternal covenant that began in Eden and was nearly lost in the flood. The flood itself, according to Jubilees, lasted exactly 1 full year. Not a vague time of destruction, but a divinely measured event aligning with God's perfect calendar. And when the waters receded, the ark did not simply rest on Mount Ararat, as Genesis states. The Jubilees identifies the resting place as Mount Lubar, a specific peak within the Ararat range. This seemingly small detail underscores a broader truth in Jubilees, the belief that geography, history, and divine purpose are tightly interwoven. Every mountain, every day, every law is tied to heaven's design. After the flood, God establishes a new covenant with Noah. But this covenant is not just a promise of protection. It is a reestablishment of divine order. In Jubilees, Noah receives laws of sacrifice, purity, dietary distinction, and the observance of sacred time. Most remarkably, Noah is instructed to keep the Sabbath and celebrate a festival called the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot. A feast that, in the traditional timeline, is not introduced until the time of Moses. Jubilees asserts that these commandments were not innovations at Sinai. They were ancient, eternal, passed down from heaven. And Noah, like Adam before him, was chosen to preserve them. Another powerful moment in this post-flood narrative is the division of the earth. In Genesis, Noah's sons simply spread out and the nations form organically. But in Jubilees, the division of land is divinely ordered. The earth is split between Shem, Ham, and Japheth by casting lots under God's instruction. The territories are assigned by name, purpose, and destiny, and the division is sealed on the heavenly tablets. This is not random migration. It is prophecy fulfilled through geography, a sacred blueprint etched into the land itself. Noah's obedience in following these instructions sets a new foundation for humanity. He becomes the bridge between the corrupted past and the redemptive future. His righteousness, his sacrifice, and his commitment to the divine laws serve as a template for what is to come. Because in Jubilees, the law is not bound to a single nation or a single moment. It is timeless. And those who walk in it, like Noah, are part of a lineage that stretches from the beginning of time into eternity. But the flood was not the end of opposition. For even as God restored the earth and reestablished his covenant, the enemy was not finished. Mastema, the prince of spirits, continued his resistance. And in Egypt, where God's people would later be enslaved, that ancient struggle would rise again. Not merely as a battle between slaves and empire, but as a war between heaven's power and Egypt's gods. A confrontation that would reveal just how far the cosmic conflict had spread. Plagues in the war against Egypt's gods. To many, the Exodus story is a powerful account of liberation from slavery. But in the Book of Jubilees, it is something more. It is a cosmic battle, a confrontation not only between Moses and Pharaoh, but between the God of Israel and the spiritual powers that ruled over Egypt. The plagues are not simply tools of persuasion. They are targeted strikes, divine judgments meant to dismantle the spiritual infrastructure of a land steeped in idolatry. Jubilees reveals that behind the power of Egypt stood a force older and more cunning than any pharaoh, Mastema, the same spiritual adversary who corrupted the watchers, who argued for the preservation of demons after the flood, who now stands as the guiding influence behind Pharaoh's stubborn heart. According to Jubilees, Mastema personally empowered Egypt's sorcerers to mimic the miracles of Moses. When Aaron's rod turned into a serpent, Mastema ensured that Egyptian magicians could do the same. The goal was not merely to oppose God, but to confuse the people, to sow doubt in the minds of Israel, and to harden Pharaoh's resolve. This spiritual warfare escalated with each plague, the Nile turning to blood, swarms of frogs, darkness that swallowed the land. Each judgment was aimed at a specific Egyptian deity, gods believed to control the river fertility light and life itself. Jubilees interprets these events not as random acts of destruction, but as deliberate assaults against false powers. One by one, the gods of Egypt were exposed as powerless before the true creator. Mastema did not retreat quietly. In a bold and direct attack, he attempted to kill Moses before his mission could even begin. But God intervened. And at the climax of this war, in the death of the firstborn, the final blow was delivered, not just to Pharaoh's household, but to the very idea that any force, earthly or spiritual, could stand against the will of God. Jubilees records that after this final plague, Mastema was bound for a time, restrained by God's angels to allow Israel to prepare for their departure. But his hatred did not die. Just as the Israelites began their journey to freedom, Mastema was released again. He immediately re-entered Pharaoh's heart, fueling one last act of rebellion. The Egyptian army surged forward, chasing the children of Israel to the edge of the sea. But God had already written the outcome. What looked like a trap was in fact a divine stage, a place where the waters would split, where the people would pass through on dry ground, and where Egypt's might would be buried beneath the waves. Jubilees frames this as more than an escape. It is a cleansing, a purging of evil from the path of the chosen people. A final reminder that God does not simply deliver from bondage, He defeats the spiritual forces behind it. Yet the Exodus is not the final act in this sacred drama, because the God who shattered Egypt's gods was not content to bring His people out of slavery. He had something to give them, something older than Moses, older than Abraham, older even than Adam. A law, a covenant, a reflection of heaven's order. And that law, according to the Book of Jubilees, had been waiting since before the world began. Moses and the revelation of eternal law. When Moses climbed Mount Sinai, traditional accounts describe it as the moment when Israel first received the law. But in the Book of Jubilees, this event is far more than a historical turning point. It is a restoration of something ancient, a moment when eternal laws already written in the heavenly tablets are finally entrusted to a nation chosen to guard them. According to Jubilees, these commandments were not new. They were the original design of the universe, principles observed by the angels themselves. Now, for the first time, they were being fully revealed to mankind. The angel of the presence who serves directly before God is the one who delivers these laws to Moses. He explains not only what the commandments are, but where they come from and why they matter. They had existed before creation, before the stars were hung in the sky, before Adam walked the garden. These laws govern the moral and spiritual structure of all reality: the Sabbath, the cycles of Jubilee, the distinctions between clean and unclean. All of it had been part of the divine pattern since the beginning. Moses, then, is not portrayed as the originator of a new religion, but as the revealer of a divine blueprint, a servant called to reintroduce humanity to the sacred rhythms of God. The Sabbath, for instance, is not explained as a cultural tradition or a national identity marker. It is presented as a reflection of the seventh day of creation, a day sanctified long before the giving of the Ten Commandments. Even the festivals such as the Feast of Weeks and the Day of Atonement are shown to be part of heaven's calendar. Their dates and observances were fixed in the heavenly tablets and handed down from angels to man. Jubilees also emphasizes the importance of the divine calendar itself. The solar year of 364 days is once again presented as the only true measure of sacred time. It is not only practical, but holy, a structure that ensures that feasts and Sabbaths fall on the proper days. The angel warns that if this calendar is not followed, sacred observances will fall into error. Festivals will be held on the wrong days. And with that, spiritual confusion and disorder will spread throughout the people. This insistence on sacred time ties directly to the moral weight of the law, because in Jubilees, law is not just a set of commands. It is a form of alignment, a way to bring the actions of men into harmony with the order of heaven. To violate the law is to disrupt that harmony. To obey it is to participate in God's eternal design. Even more striking is the claim that these laws are binding not just on Israel, but on all creation. Jubilees declares that the angels themselves observed these commandments, that the righteous among men across generations were keeping them long before Moses. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are all described as observing the Sabbath, offering sacrifices, and practicing the purity laws handed down from heaven. Their obedience was not innovation, it was restoration. This understanding radically reorients the way we view Moses and his role in sacred history. He is not merely a leader or a prophet. He is the chosen vessel through whom God restores what had been lost since Eden. A law not invented for a people, but given to a people so that they might preserve what was written before time began. And yet this divine plan was not without resistance, because even as God offered eternal law, he revealed something else to Moses, a prophecy, a warning, that the people who received the law would one day abandon it, that their hearts would grow cold, and that their exile, their suffering, and even the destruction of the temple were already recorded not as punishment alone, but as part of a greater redemptive story. A story that was written long before the first stone tablets were ever carved. Prophecy, apostasy, and the pre-written future. As Moses stood upon the mountains receiving laws that stretched back before the foundations of the world, the angel of the presence revealed something more. A vision, not of triumph, but of heartbreak. Not of Israel's glory, but of its rebellion. According to the Book of Jubilees, this revelation was not simply a prediction, it was a reading of what had already been inscribed. On the heavenly tablets were not only laws and commandments, but the unfolding story of a nation, its faith, its failures, its exile, and its eventual redemption. Jubilees declares that Israel's future disobedience had already been seen by God, that the people who stood at Sinai trembling before fire and cloud would eventually turn away. They would forsake the Sabbath, ignore the sacred calendar, defile the festivals, and chase after foreign gods. This apostasy would not be the result of ignorance, but willful rebellion, and for that judgment would come. The angel did not soften the message. He spoke of exile, of a scattered people, a destroyed temple, a holy land overrun by foreign powers. These were not mere consequences. They were part of the divine calendar events scheduled with the same precision as the feasts and Sabbaths. Even the time of Israel's suffering was fixed. Jubilees insists that nothing happens by chance, that all human history, including our greatest failures, fits within a redemptive timeline authored by God Himself. And yet this revelation is not without hope. Because after the exile, after the desolation, a promise is revealed. There would come a time when Israel would return, not just to the land, but to the law. Their hearts would be softened, their eyes opened, and once again they would walk in the ways written on the heavenly tablets. The covenant would be renewed. The people would be restored. This restoration would not be political alone. It would be spiritual, a cleansing of the nation from within, and it would prepare the way for something even greater, the coming of a new age, a messianic kingdom, a world where righteousness is not imposed by force but written on the hearts of the faithful, where the law is no longer distant but deeply intimate. In Jubilees, this vision stands as both a warning and a comfort, that even when humanity turns from the path remains, that even in exile, the divine design continues unfolding. The prophetic vision given to Moses reveals the heart of the Book of Jubilees. That history is sacred. That time is not random. That suffering is not without purpose. And that in the end, God will restore what was lost. But the angel's revelation does not stop with Israel's return, because this sacred timeline stretches further toward a final confrontation, a day when evil will be judged, when the adversary will fall, and when the law of heaven will be fully realized on earth. What follows is the final chapter of this cosmic journey, a revelation of judgment angels and the rise of a kingdom that cannot be shaken, the role of angels in the end times. Throughout the Book of Jubilees, angels are more than messengers. They are keepers of time, guardians of law, and watchers over sacred history. But in the final chapters, their role expands even further. They become warriors, judges, agents of divine justice sent to bring the cosmic conflict to its appointed end. As the timeline of history approaches its climax, the angel of the presence reveals to Moses what lies ahead, not only for Israel, but for the entire world. According to Jubilees, the end of days will be marked by a dramatic separation, a time when angels descend to divide the righteous from the wicked, not by force but by clarity. The veil will be lifted. The true nature of every heart will be exposed. Those who walked according to the commandments, the sacred calendar, the Sabbath, the eternal law will be gathered. They will be protected. They will inherit peace. But those who oppose the law, who clung to rebellion, will face judgment. One of the most striking moments in this vision is the defeat of Mastema, the ancient adversary, the same being who tempted the watchers, corrupted Egypt, and tried to destroy Israel from within. In the end, he too is judged. The angels of God will bind him. He will be cast into the abyss, sealed away until the time of final destruction. This act represents more than punishment. It is the restoration of divine order, the cleansing of creation from the last remnant of rebellion. This moment echoes themes found in other apocalyptic writings, like the Book of Revelation. But in Jubilees, the emphasis is placed squarely on the law. Evil is not simply chaos. It is a conscious resistance against the divine order written from the beginning. And the angels, as servants of that order, carry out the final cleansing. Their actions are not fueled by wrath, but by obedience, not driven by vengeance, but by righteousness. As the wicked are separated and judged, the righteous are elevated, not by power, but by purity. They are those who honored the divine rhythms, who remembered the Sabbath, who walked in holiness even when the world forgot. And now they become the foundation of a new era, a time of peace, a world in which the law is no longer written on stone or scroll, but on every heart. But the end is not simply about judgment, it is about renewal. The angels who once watched the fall of man now witness his restoration. And as the heavens open and the divine kingdom is established, a new chapter begins, one in which the Creator dwells with his people once again. But before that eternal peace is revealed, Jubilees offers one last vision, a promise, a messianic hope, that one will come to reign in justice, restore creation, and bring all things into unity with the law of God. The messianic kingdom and the restoration of all things. As the final pages of the Book of Jubilees unfold, the mystery of Israel's destiny gives way to a promise, a vision of renewal that stretches beyond exile, beyond suffering, and beyond the reach of evil itself. In this vision, a figure emerges, a ruler not born of politics, nor shaped by war, but anointed by heaven. While the name Messiah is never explicitly used, the image is unmistakable. This chosen one will reign in righteousness. He will uphold the eternal law, and through him, the world will be brought back into alignment with the original design of creation. In this messianic age, the law is not abolished. It is fulfilled, not merely observed outwardly, but written on the hearts of the people. Jubilees emphasizes that in this renewed kingdom, justice flows not from fear of punishment, but from the inward desire to walk in holiness. The Sabbaths, the festivals, the divine calendar, all are honored once more. But now, not as burdens. They become rhythms of joy, pathways that lead people into deeper communion with the Creator. This kingdom is not built on military conquest or national pride. It is the fruit of repentance, of hearts turning back, of generations rediscovering what was lost in the wilderness of history. The people who once stumbled in rebellion are now restored. The covenant that was broken is mended, and the land that lay desolate blooms again under the reign of peace. But the climax of this vision is not only the rise of righteousness, it is the final defeat of evil. The lake of fire appears not as a symbol of divine cruelty, but as the ultimate removal of rebellion from God's creation. The wicked are not merely punished, they are removed from the story. The adversary and his hosts, the forces that distorted creation from the beginning, are destroyed forever. And then silence. Not emptiness, but peace. A world in harmony. A creation no longer at war with itself. A people walking in step with heaven. And a law that from the very beginning was meant to lead humanity not into bondage, but into life. In the Book of Jubilees, the end is not really an end. It is the return to what was always meant to be. A return to Eden. A return to holiness. A return to the law of the Lord, written not just on scrolls, but in the soul. For centuries, the Book of Jubilees lay hidden in the shadows, dismissed by councils, forgotten by traditions, and preserved only in distant corners of the faith. Yet its words still whisper through time, calling us to remember what was once known. A divine order woven into the fabric of creation. A law not made by man, but born of eternity. A story that began before Genesis and stretches beyond Revelation. Perhaps the deeper mystery is not why Jubilees was banned, but why its truths feel so familiar. As if something within us already knew that time was sacred, that the commandments were more than rules, they were rhythms, that history is not random, but written, and that beneath every human moment lies a divine calendar moving toward a promised restoration. This book invites us to see Scripture not just as a collection of stories, but as a unified cosmic drama. One where angels record nations rise and fall, and every generation is given the choice to walk in harmony or rebellion. What if the question is not whether Jubilees should be canon, but whether its message still speaks to a world that has forgotten how to keep time with God? If something in this journey stirred your heart, I invite you to walk deeper. Like this video to help others discover it. Share it with someone who longs to explore the hidden corners of faith. Subscribe to our channel so we can continue uncovering ancient mysteries together. And if you feel led, leave a comment below. What part of the Book of Jubilees stood out to you the most? What questions did it raise? Or what light did it offer? Thank you for joining me in this sacred exploration. Until next time, may the rhythms of heaven guide your steps, and may the law written on your heart draw you ever closer to the truth.